Tracy.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tracy Rossi, and I am community member on the allocation committee. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Tracy. Felicia.
Felicia Tripp, community member on the allocation committee, and happy to be here.
Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson.
Practically introduced me for my already. I'm Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson, Multnomah County Commissioner for District 3. Very happy to be here.
Thanks. And Mitch.
Hi, everybody. Mitch Horniker. Looking forward to a great meeting.
Great. And our next item is to approve the minutes from September 14th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve?
I motion to approve the September minutes.
Thank you, Felicia. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All right. It has passed. So next, and do we have any general public comments before we get into the meat of the agenda, Lisa Pellegrino?
We do not. We don't have anyone signed up today. So
okay.
Public comments.
Okay. Well, the purpose today is that it's our check-in with all of you. We have 4 grantee partners who will join the meeting to provide some reflection. And why don't I turn this over to whom for the grantee partner reflections? Who from the staff is driving that?
Erica, you're muted. I can go ahead.
Thank you, Erica.
Okay, so first off, I think I'll call on Paul Tebron, who is a teacher mentor from Elevate Oregon, which is one of our Small Grants Fund grantees.
Thank you, Erica. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Paul Tebron Jr. I am now the program director at Elevate Oregon. During the pandemic, I was a teacher mentor. And so, you know, it's been tough. Excuse me if I have some gaps. Just thinking about the pandemic, you know, working with kids, how tough it's been for them, just having conversations. But fortunately for us in our organization, we were able to stay connected to our kids. One thing that we focus on is building family and strong relationships with kids and their families. And we were blessed and fortunate enough to offer some COVID assistance to some families. Last December, we received funds to help pay some bills, help with some rental assistance, along with some other things. We stay connected with our students via Zoom virtually, just like every other organization in schools. But what made us so special is that we got to have one-on-one time with students via Zoom meeting rooms, just to check in, see how they're doing, just check on their well-being. And because we have a partnership with the Park Road School District, we were actually able to get some students who traditionally wouldn't attend Zoom classes to come to school. So one example, we have one of our mentors who speaks Spanish. And so sometimes there are language barriers, and this young lady became more confident to come to school virtually because that mentor, you know, bridged the gap between between students and teachers and families. And this young lady wasn't, I mean, to be quite honest, she wasn't attending school, but because of the relationship that she has with her Elevate mentor, she was a 5th grader, now in 6th grade, still attached to the program, feeling more confident, things of that nature. And then me personally, I had the senior class last year, and man, getting them across the threshold in the pandemic, I think I have about 17 gray hairs in my beard that I didn't have previously, but it's all good. It's all for the greater good. Help kids get across the stage, get to college, get to trade school and things of that nature. And like I said, none of this happens without having those strong relationships with students. And we're blessed and fortunate enough to be a grantee to continue doing the work and to help continue build community and build our kids. And so thank you for having me.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much, Paul. I think what we could do is wait till the end, or would you like to do questions after each person, Erica?
I think I think it's fine to wait until after all of the grantees have gone. Then there might be some questions that are relevant for more than one organization.
Sounds good.
Okay, so next, can I call on Sonia Damtu, who is with the Ethiopian and Eritrean Cultural Resource Center, which is another small grantee.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Sonia Damtu, and I have been working with refugees for about 20 years in different capacity. I work now with EECRC, and it all started out with just before COVID, we were trying to help newcomers to Portland get acquainted with the social system, how to navigate the system, whether it's school or social or medical, or any of that stuff. And then soon after COVID hit, and before they could get assimilated and helped to learn the system, they were left kind of out of the whole circle of assistantship that usually comes up with refugees and immigrants. And we had to step up and try to get computers for the kids, teach them how to use it, work with the school to make sure that there's food and other, PPEs, make sure that that particular community group, there were about 14 families we were working with, so that they know what's going on with COVID and how they're getting impacted and what kind of services that they can still get. With COVID, services that they would normally be qualified for became more difficult to navigate and to access, because almost everything went online, and before they can even learn how to navigate just the social system where they go to the office and face-to-face, maybe with an interpreter, suddenly all that was kind of gone. So, and I came in as a volunteer as well as other people, and we started working with these families, trying to get the students assimilated and not just assimilated, but to learn how to use the online system. And it was very difficult because now all of a sudden they still don't know the language, they still don't know the education system, and now they have to do everything online. And they also did not have computers. So we worked with the school district and other organizations to make sure that they got those, and had to learn to teach them how to use it all online. We were ourselves learning at the same time. And in the middle of all this is when Erica and the PCL program came up, and that was just a life-saving funding for the organization, because until then it was all voluntary and with very small funding from different organizations, generally for food and other kinds of resources. So this opened up opportunities for us to really help these community members, especially the new ones. And we had only like 7 kids who were in the program, and their parents suddenly, by the time we got this PCL program going, we're now to 26 kids and about 30 other kids on waiting list. And the most wonderful thing is the technical help that we got to get the funding, the application process going, and also to put together the financial, the budget, and all those things that, because we did not have funding, we were not ready completely for that. And with PCL and Erica and the team doing the convening meetings where we all get together, all the small grantees, and learn from each other, and also having the reports being read and given, like inputs, and hearing from each other's experiences, that helped really just tremendously, more than I can express. I thank you so much, Erica, and the whole team, and of course, the PCL grant as well. And it's improved the lives of the children and the parents. Now we concentrate with resources in having the parents learn how to become better parents, more equipped with the knowledge of how the school system works, having them get access to medical health and insurance, providing food and rental assistance and all those things that we can access for them, or help them navigate through other agencies as well. So our organization just kind of grew quite a bit in the last year and a half. And so we're just grateful, and just very important. It's very important that funders go ahead and look to grassroots organizations that are within the communities to make sure that all the help that is available get to the communities, because it's very difficult to go directly to the community because the communities themselves don't go seeking it for the lack of information. So our organization does a lot of referrals, teaching about health and education and how to navigate the whole system and learn to advocate for themselves. And in just the last year, it's just been amazing. After summer, we kind of opened it up with great care to face-to-face tutoring and mentoring. And the children, after having been cooped up for about a year and a few months, they were just happy to be out in the park, playing soccer, learning to learn from each other and support each other. The mentors were amazing. And the children and their families got to visit organizations and zoo and the OMSI. They participated in the Juneteenth celebrations and a lot of other different activities that opened their eyes to helping them grow, not just academically, but also in social skills and confidence and just knowing how everything works and how everything is kind of interconnected. And they're learning to become extremely good leaders themselves and helping up the younger kids. Many of them are turning into amazing mentors and tutors themselves. So it's just been a tremendous help. And there is greater need, and the more we offer our help, the more people know about it and more needs are coming up. And it's been very stressful, but I can't imagine having done this without the funding that we got. And so thank you so very much for all the technical assistance, the encouragement, the knowledge that you guys passed through, and all the referrals for different kinds of information like COVID, and we just can't do more. But it's been an amazing experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia. And so those were the two small grantees. And I specifically want to recognize that I so appreciated in Elevate. I was hearing about how they were really responding to youth violence as well as COVID, all of the different things happening in the community. And EECRC, they literally soaked up every single resource I sent out. They sent out a thing and they're like, we got it, Erica. We're going to go get that grant. So I really wanted to make sure that those two were highlighted. Okay, now moving on to the mentoring grantees. I'm going to start with Emil Nischik from College Possible.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak with you. My name is Emily Nischik, and I'm the Executive Director for College Possible Oregon. And I stepped into this role in July of 2020, so right when the pandemic hit, and have really been incredibly proud of our team here and the work that we've done, and our students and our families. I think the challenges, lots of them have been highlighted, but some of the ones that were specific to College Possible, working with students, specifically at David Douglas High School, was just the student recruitment piece of it. I think was probably our biggest challenge last year, being fully virtual and operating in what felt like kind of a vacuum. Like we were going to teachers who only had a couple of hours with students in session, and asking them for 5 minutes from that time felt really hard. And so our coaches persisted last year and were able to recruit about a half cohort of what we would hope to have had. And something that we sort of transitioned to was recruiting students year round. So recognizing that short window where they could get accepted into a program where they had the potential for 8 years of support until they graduate college, it was really important for us to be able to continue to accept students and continue to actively recruit in the program throughout the entire year. And one of the changes that we've made going into this year is that we actually recruited seniors into our program for the first time. So specifically at David Douglas, we were able to add 10 additional seniors to the program who were recruited this fall. And so while that makes the coaches' workload significantly harder, and I think we knew it was going to be harder, it just puts a lot more pressure on them to get those students up to speed very quickly and differentiate the level of support that they're providing for their cohorts and the students within those cohorts. But it was something that we felt was really important, that they didn't lose out on that opportunity for the support. And I think we took a lot of learnings from last year as well. One of the things that we have built into our program that we learned from being fully virtual and serving students was that we always knew that one-on-one support was important, but our model has always been very much based on a cohort and session and after school session. And while that is still an important component of the program, we have put in intentional one-on-one coaching for both juniors and seniors so that they can meet with their coach, and that level of differentiation that students really need right now, that has been really helpful for us. So they're not just in the schools available to meet with students, but they're actually actively having to schedule one-on-one sessions with them and covering curriculum in those sessions that is tailored to that particular student need. And so that's something that we see being a part of our program moving forward, and has allowed us, especially this year, to help get students caught up. I think a couple other things that come to mind this year for us, in my mind and in our staff's mind, we were thinking we'll be back in school and kind of pick back up, and student recruitment will be back visible in the building and be able to be that large presence that we've been in the past. And I think so many unanticipated challenges have come up with that, and whether or not students are mentally even there to be focusing on that next step. When some of them were hearing from counselors, they might be a junior, but they're feeling like their high school experience just got started in many ways. And so helping support through that social emotional support, and having students see college as an option for themselves and a logical next step in a time where they're just readjusting to sort of a new way of being in school has definitely been challenging for us. And then another piece of it that I think we didn't maybe anticipate was just the physical knowledge of our program in the school. When you look at COVID really spanning 3 school years now, and the juniors that we're recruiting had just been in the building for five months or so as freshmen. And so there really was not an awareness of our program because we weren't physically there and in person with them. So in some ways, in some of our districts, it's felt like we've been sort of reestablishing ourselves with students in the awareness piece, and really spending a lot of time getting information out to students and families about the program. But at David Douglas, a really huge bright spot for us has been that 3 out of the 4 of our coaches are both David Douglas alumni and College Possible alumni. And so some of those issues that we've had at some of the other schools, we've been able to overcome them strictly through those students. Still, after going to college, they still have relationships with those counselors and teachers, and the school counselors there let them come to the meetings with their students if they're having a hard time engaging with them. Or tracking them down and meeting with them. So the counselor will invite them, and it's because they have that personal relationship from back when they were in high school there. So that has been really cool to see, and the fast way that they've been able to sort of integrate back into the schools and be able to utilize those relationships. And it's something that we're starting to see more and more with College Possible. This year we have 5 student alumni that are serving with us. And we have 2 full-time staff members that we've recently hired that are also College Possible alumni. And so that is just sort of full circle for us in best case when we get to have that student perspective in-house with our team here. One final bright spot for us is we have at David Douglas 2 Quest Bridge matches, and this is probably the top scholarship in the country where a student applies and then it is a full ride, everything included. And 2 of them matched with, one with Swarthmore and one with Princeton. And so to think about all the work that went, it's a huge long process for these students to go through and think about all the things that they're going through in their personal lives and in our environment, and to persevere through that and get through the application and match is just really an incredible opportunity for them and their families, and the generational change that can happen from that. So proud of our team. It's been a really hard 2 years, but really grateful for the Levy's support and allowing us to continue to support students. Thank you.
Our final grantee is Antonio Servin Gonzalez with Campfire.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antonio Servín Gonzalez. I am proudly representing Campfire Columbia today. So during my time at Campfire Columbia, I have witnessed as we've shifted our program practices, especially during these challenging COVID times, to better meet the needs of our young people and our families. At Campfire, we believe that the best way for us to show up in the lives of our young people is to also show up in the lives of their parents. So we make a point to intentionally check in with families at least once a year. And then from there, we let the families decide how frequently they need a check-in. So for some families, it might mean checking in every once a week. Some families might mean once a month, sometimes at the quarters or at the semesters. It varies by family. And these established relationships really came through during distance learning because they were allowed us to reach out to students who weren't showing up for class or who were struggling with like figuring out which Zoom link we were using this week because they were so ever changing. One of my favorite moments that we had last year was our director at the time and our assistant director went over to Camp Namanu because it's a camp that Campfire owns, and grabbed some toilet paper rolls, those gigantic ones that you see inside the grocery stores. And they delivered them to our families because, as you know, the toilet paper shortage of 2020 was very, very real. I know my family felt it. From a program perspective, we really listened to our young people and noticed that there was a huge Zoom fatigue. Everyone was tired of being on Zoom, getting on classes, meetings. I know I personally really hated seeing a calendar invite for another Zoom meeting of the day. The first thing we did as Campfire staff is figured out what asynchronous and synchronous meant, because that was a new word that popped up for us. After we figured that out, we started planning activity kits. So students received things like puzzles, STEM building activities, or one of our Campfire mentors even built terrariums with our students on Zoom. We planned challenges. So one of the challenges that we did in my program was we did a home/neighborhood scavenger hunt where students had to look for things in their neighborhoods and take pictures or make a video and submit it to their Campfire mentor. And we also, some of our mentors, I'm going to say the word attempted to do some of the TikTok challenges. Again, that was attempted. I'm not sure how well they did, but they did attempt them. We also had those opportunities for students who wanted to engage on the Zooms to meet and just be in community and play games. You know, we know that, you know, homework help is really important, but so was the social emotional health needs of our students. So we took a pause on our traditional model and really spent time teaching students how to build relationships, playing games on Zoom. Many of our mentors took it upon themselves to do research on how to make one of our favorite in-person games virtual. So we spent a lot of time being creative with each other and learning new things. Across our programs at Lane, George, and Harrison Park Middle School, we supported families with about $4,750 in rental assistance, grocery gift cards, meals, and other supports that our families needed. Right now we are back in person, and I'm sure many of you have read, but our schools are facing a critical staff shortage. We are seeing an increase in student behaviors and many other challenges. And so we as Campfire staff have been talking about the ways that we should show up for our young people. And so some staff are pushing into classrooms to not only provide support for our Campfire students, but also the whole school community. We're creating opportunities for our students to socialize safely and to, get more of that community building going. Relationships are really at the core of what we do. And it's important that we continue to not only build relationships with students, but help students build relationships with students. Overall, I want to say that we are just very grateful for the flexibility and support that you've given us. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Commissioner Ryan, I'm going to turn it back to you. I just so appreciate hearing the stories of our grantees. I've been so inspired by them from their grant reports, and I've been hearing such wonderful things about their work in the community as I go out into meetings. I'm grateful for them to be able to share their stories with you today.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for organizing this. It's such a delight. I wanted to say we have about 10 minutes for some Q&A. I'll open the floor up to everyone. And thank you for all of the guests for remaining on the call. I appreciate it. Anyone like to get this started?
I'll get it started. I know that COVID has been a huge impact for educators and nonprofit service providers like yourselves. What are some of the adaptations that you will continue moving forward as a lesson learned coming out of the pandemic that you'll keep from these, I feel like this forever pandemic we're in?
I know for us, just having a partnership with the school district, really just having those conversations with school board members as well as the superintendent and principals. I've actually had these conversations. It's really just giving students a platform to just talk about how they feel, talk about what's going on. I mean, especially with the social climate of all the shootings going on. A lot of these kids are related to victims. And then just coming back, when you think about brain development, social and emotional skills, things of that nature, but really just giving students the platform to just talk about how they feel. And just after speaking with one principal, they said it's a phenomenal idea, just for peers to understand that they're not going through things alone. So really just giving students more of a voice going forward, depending on, whether it's a pandemic or not, just really, empowering them to just speak their truth and, just talk about their feelings.
If I may, I would like to add.
Yes, please.
It's a wonderful, what he just said is amazing, actually, because that's so important. Coming from an African community, and especially new families that have arrived in the last few years, they've come into COVID and all this racial unrest and all that stuff. And it's just so shocking and so unprepared with the communities that we serve. We're also trying to address those kind of things. So I would love to connect with you at some point and work with you on that. But from the COVID, what we've learned is that we have to, and someone has already said that, is work with the families to arm them with information, to get them to learn how to advocate for themselves and their families, and just keeping them in the loop with the school and working with the school really very closely, because like someone else was saying, there's just so many challenges right now in the school system. So being present and making sure that the community continues to be involved with the receiving community or the communities within the African communities that have been here longer to be involved, creating more mentorship and other kinds of youth and family support systems. We have to continue that, and also to teach technology in the community to everyday people. So we gave out a lot of computers and taught some parents, all the parents actually, and some elderly people how to use the computer to get email and chat and that sort of thing. So using Messenger and all those. So we kind of opened up some new ways of communicating and staying in touch. So continuing to do that is going to be very critical. And also working with all the other partners and team that we have so that we can help each other with resources that we each have different kinds of resources and different experiences, just working together and continuing to work with PCL, Levy, SEED, on any of the other organizations that have been very helpful with us so that we can grow within the communities and outside, and teaching our community members to become civically engaged. So it's a huge, huge thing. And but it's opened our eyes quite a bit with this COVID and everything that's been going on. Thank you so much.
At Campfire, just today I had a conversation with a mom regarding some concerns about like starting a program in person. Mom really loved Campfire and wants her daughter to be engaged in Campfire, but does not feel comfortable with like having her daughter be in a room with more students than she really has to. And so something that we're continuing at Campfire is if students, are not able to participate in after school programming, that doesn't mean that they no longer are part of Campfire. They will participate during the day. We'll have like lunch groups. We'll have, the opportunity for them to still engage in our Campfire programming. We'll dismiss them after school and we'll see them when, they are able to join us.
I would say similarly, we kind of discovered the same thing with our family engagement program and having virtual sessions where family members could be cooking dinner and taking care of their children and not having to take, what amounts to be 2 hours out of their evening to drive and attend sessions. So while we know that personal component and in-person is really important, I think still providing options for families to be able to attend when works best for them or doing them on the weekends is something that we will continue to move forward with the programming.
Yeah, I have a question and a statement, perhaps. Thank you all for giving examples of how you've adapted during COVID. It was actually, I was noticing how some of them are probably going to be practices that you move forward beyond. So it's always great during this, whatever this is, to find new ways of doing work, new ways of building our practices. I was taken with, Paul, you mentioned it, and Sonia as well, but it's obviously the gun violence epidemic that we're in, and the impacted communities and families are definitely targeted in your communities. Many times those are the families that are most impacted. And the City Council in April made investments in community solutions towards this. And some of the organizations include ERCO and NIA and Latino Network. And I was just taken with how it organically came out. And I also want to remind myself that it's always children and families. So all of you mentioned families just right after you said the word children. So that was not lost on me. I just want to hear a little bit more about the value of your organizations being a bridge between, building a bridge between the communities impacted and then the solutions that we need to keep building with the community safety system. We took some criticism that this was a soft investment, and I can't think of anything more foundational than investing in community and family organizations from those neighborhoods that are most impacted by gun violence. I just want to hear some more testimony about what that's like day to day right now. It sounds like it's Paul, you mentioned that it's pretty ramped, that this seems to be a very current and active conversation. So any more stories for all of us to hear about that would be helpful.
Yeah, I would say, just being, a living example to students by me being a Black male working, serving students, really just showing them, I'll say more being proactive than reactive. And what I mean by that is going out and finding partnerships and people who are committed to investing, showing kids that, there's more pathways, to being productive. I think a lot of times traditionally, we align that word success to just going to college. There are many kids with different learning styles, disabilities, but on the flip side with different skill sets and different interests, trades. And so what we have done is gone out and partnered with different businesses, different colleges, to really help students find their niche, but also exposing them to these opportunities. And so I think what happens is over time when students feel empowered and see that, it's okay to go to PCC, or it's okay, to do an apprenticeship program, or it's okay that I don't know exactly what I want to do. And then mentors that they have relationships with sharing their stories, saying that, hey, I didn't have it figured out, but I'm going to invest the time into you and have those conversations about what do you want to do, but then taking you on trips. So we took some students to Oregon State University to, tour the athletics facilities. They got to go down on the football field while players were warming up and then experience a game to really get a whole feel of the college experience. Because I think a lot of times it's just, okay, I got to go to college and do work. But here are some things that go along with that, you know, bringing in Nike and people of color to talk about, hey, I didn't think I was going to do this, you know, and I do come from communities, you know, coming from New York in the 90s where there was violence, but also helping them understand that you don't have to choose that path. There are so many different paths that you can take to be productive in life. But like I always say, you know, giving students that platform to talk about how they feel about what's going on, because what I've learned over time is that it's not really a kid problem, it's an adult problem. And when you can be transparent with kids and share that with them, and then take the time to listen to them and understand, it's just like, okay, you know, we're building that relationship and help building those bridges for them to feel empowered, and then exposing them to those different opportunities and speaking life into them as much as possible.
Thank you, Paul. It's personally really exciting because I think it was in 2008. I was a matchmaker between Park Rose and the people at Elevate to begin this relationship. So the fact that it's taken off so much is great. Sonia, I'm kind of interested in a perspective from your community in terms of, let's just say in the 90s, we had gangs that had certain names, and now it's just so much more expanded. And I've done some undercover work, if you will, with some of the community organizations out there, building those relationships on Saturday nights and such. And I was learning so much about new arrivals, new immigrants that are unfortunately impacted quite quickly sometimes by the gun violence. And I just want to get a little perspective on how you're working to hold up your families during this time.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And Paul, that was really wonderful because I can kind of see parallels, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to work with him because there's so many things he's already been addressing. For us, actually, to be honest, because they're newcomers, we concentrated on just sort of survival things like getting their education level picked up, skills built, because out of the 26 kids, 14 of them actually came in just around or just before COVID. And the way we place children, immigrant children, refugees children in school is that by age. So if a kid who is 13 years old, but has been in a refugee center and he's only had 2 years of education, but then he comes here and then he gets put in a class that is a level of 13-year-old, which might be 7th or 8th grader, and he's completely lost with the language, the culture, the school system. And on top of that is just learning how to navigate everything. And half the time when kids learn English within the first couple months, just enough, they become the brokers of services for their parents. They're the interpreters. So they cease being children, basically. So they come from trauma and then another trauma and then another trauma. So the last year has been spent a lot about just building confidence, knowledge, support, being able to talk about things that happen in their lives and that it is a safe place that they've come. For most immigrants, it's like, okay, the promised land now, we don't have to worry about anything. We just have to stay honest, work hard, everything will be okay. And our children will be doctors and engineers and lawyers and nothing else is an option. So they've come in with all these big dreams, but don't know how to, navigate the system to get those dreams realized. So on top of all this is the racial issues, the gang violence and the gun problem. It's just so overwhelming and re-traumatizing that we've spent the last year just building that kind of, it's okay, we can get through this and there will be ways to address this. But the next step is actually about that. We were talking about it with Jonas, my director, is what do we do? Who do we hook up with so we can address these kinds of issues? Most of the time parents concentrate on their children working hard and staying out of trouble and they'll make it. And there isn't that idea that sometimes college is not an option for everyone, especially if you have not had a very strong academic background, or it could be a financial issue, or it could be many different things. And so presenting to parents that there are all these other options Paul was talking about, and making it where it's available in information, or just walking them through it to get to those possibilities. Because kids, on top of everything else in immigrant families, have the added stress of excelling, because we've come all the way here for you guys to be successful. And if there is a problem out there, it's probably because people are looking for it, or they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you don't leave the house, you just stay here, do your homework. So there's a lot of stress. So that's why the family also needs to be in that cycle, or in that conversation. So there's a lot of fear. There's a huge amount of fear. And for a lot of them who have come from genocide, or, imprisonment and all those kinds of things, it's pretty difficult and a delicate thing to be walking around with. And so we're working on those. But one example I wanted to give is, I have a family who they were persecuted for many different reasons, political, and the family was trying to escape the country, and they got caught. And the mother and her 2 children are here waiting for them to join them, but the father and his 2 other kids get thrown in jail, and the father stays in a prison, underground prison, across from where the children are with other children, and he doesn't see them. And because he had diabetes, he went kind of half blind. And so when they tried to escape, he had to carry one daughter, and the son had to guide him through horrendous journey to get to a safe place where they can be registered for UNHCR before they can come here. It's just heart-wrenching, but it's also very encouraging, because they're just probably the most healthiest in attitude and in joy, this family. It's amazing that they have gone through it. So it's just been a learning experience. I've worked with refugees for years and been away for a few years, and coming back to it just hit me. And so with those kinds of children, all the stuff that is going on, I hate to have their joy dim. And that's why I want them to still be enthusiastic, and that everything is possible, but you also have to arm them with enough information to be careful. And if something was to happen, that they have the skill or the support to survive it and do well. So this is, in big way, some of the things that we have to address in 2022. So I'm looking forward to working with everybody, the Levy and other partners, in addressing this. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a very important issue.
Thank you, Sonia. And thank all 4 of you for being here. You're definitely, we're all craving more time, but I'm told that we need to move on to the next agenda topic. And I just thank you for bringing hope to all of us today for your good work. And I'm so happy that we can support you. And we look forward to this relationship growing and deepening. Thank you so much. I'll move it over to you, Lisa, for the next item.
Hi, so we're going to talk a little bit about just some quick summaries of convenings that we have been doing with grantees, kind of in the vein of what you've just heard from all the folks from these mentoring programs, because it really, I find it, as a staff person who doesn't get to necessarily meet with people from other program areas all the time, this was really great to hear from you all. And I would say that the after school program area folks that I've been working with in convenings had many of the same things to say about what it's been like to go back to reintegrate programming in schools, and the challenges they've been having with kids and staff being new to being back in buildings, and how behavior has been issues as was it Antonio saying this? I think I can't remember who said it, but just that there's a lot there around social emotional adjustment to school again that is showing up in after school programs and for providers. And so there was a lot of discussion on that. That was a major theme. The other thing that people mentioned, that some of the folks you just heard from mentioned that came up in those convenings as well, was the effects of school staff shortages and the difficulty of finding staff for a program as well. So I just talked to a grantee again today about who's basically filling in for her direct service staff who both quit at the same time. So that's a story I've heard repeated again, and I saw a lot of folks talking about that and trying to share strategies on trying to find good people to work with kids in this moment, because it's hard to do. A lot of folks interested in increasing collaboration among programs, and as you just heard, Sonia and he's gone off screen and I'm completely spacing his name, the man from Elevate.
Paul.
Paul, thank you. I have a terrible memory for names. Talking about collaborating, and that just warmed my heart. And that was something that a lot of folks were talking about at the after school convening as well, is really desperately wanting to do that and not always having enough time to make it happen. So those were some of the big themes, and I think it was interesting to hear them again echoed here. So I think it's helping all of us to kind of just stay in touch with what's going on the ground, since not all of us are in those conversations every day. So with that, I'll sign off, and I'll ask Joel to talk a little bit about the convenings he's had with foster care and child abuse grantees.
So the foster care group, we met in December, a little bit before Thanksgiving. And I think, one thing it's to add to, we definitely had very similar conversations. The additional add that came up in that meeting was talking about referrals. That those foster care programs are so dependent on getting referrals from DHS workers, and it's a constant conversation with those programs, and they talked about how the pandemic has impacted referrals. Even those programs, you had a spectrum that day. You had some programs who felt like they were doing really, really good referrals, and some of them are still struggling to get referrals from DHS workers. And so we talked about the variety of reasons why that may be going on, as well as possible remedies for them to up their referrals. And then the Child Abuse and Prevention Intervention Program grantees just met last week. And that particular day, what we talked about was basically how the pandemic was impacting not only programming in their service to the clients that they were working with their respective clients, but also just how multifaceted the pandemic is. They're all aware of. So like, for example, the example that I have there in the memo that was one of the conversations is about how parents still to this day, even though they have kids in school, still to this day are being impacted by the pandemic, with kids being at home because they may have a classroom closure. Well, that may be going on. They may also impact them staffing wise. The worker that's working with that family may be dealing with that. Or you may have a teacher who has a kiddo who is out of school because of an exposure. So they just really talked about how the pandemic is just so multifaceted in there, and they're always having creative ways in which they're trying to work with those parents and helping them having a good space so they can get the services they need, as well as the children that they're working with. And then that was another thing that's definitely was talked about, was just about the vaccines and the mandates. There's still some confusion amongst parents. And so as I forget who it was, Sonia was talking about getting information just to parents and just sharing information and get them, as informed as possible so they can make the best decisions that they can for them and their family and their kids, and supporting their kids to be out there in the world. Yeah. Erica next.
Oh, I think I'm next, and then
Oh, you're
Erica.
next.
Thanks,
Okay.
Jill.
Okay.
So I work with our hunger relief grantee portfolio and our early childhood grantee portfolio, and the hunger relief grantees met in November. They are interested for the first time as a group, and they're interested in meeting a couple times a year for networking purposes, working on some shared problem solving and partnership opportunities. So they had some small group discussions on that. And two issues that surfaced for sort of work going forward are trying to find more consistent sources of food supply that is halal. Many of the grantees in our hunger relief portfolio are working with families who have that food preference. And so they're trying to find those opportunities. So we're going to do some ad hoc work group to identify that and be able to share that information across grantees. Similarly, our grantees are in hunger relief are interested in having sources of food supply that are owned and operated by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. They want to be able to support those vendors and those markets and those restaurants as part of their food supply options. So we actually have a work group starting on that tomorrow to sort of figure out what exactly they want to work on together and how they can share that information across the portfolio of hunger relief grantees. And then in early childhood, that grantee group has not met, convened by the Levy. There is a standing early childhood home visiting community practice in Multnomah County in which the Levy has participated for a long time. And so do Levy funded early childhood programs that do home visiting. And then many of the preschool programs are also convened, especially our Head Start providers through other means. So personally, I haven't put energy into bringing them together yet, but that is definitely something that will be happening in the new year. Usually annually, our home visiting grantees and our Head Start grantees want to talk to each other about children who are age 3 and transitioning into Head Start. And then oftentimes the preschool grantees want to talk to the school districts about transition to kindergarten. So we are typically helping make those opportunities happen. So I'll pass it over to Erica.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the mentoring convening first. So we have convened the mentoring grantees only one time. It was our first time in October. And I convened both the large grant and the small grant mentoring because the majority of the small grants portfolio is mentoring. And the general focus was just really getting to know each other and each other's work and kind of building that collaboration. We spent some time in small groups. People really appreciated the opportunity to be in space with such diverse programs, serving Black, Indigenous, people of color, and really wanted to be really intentional about building ways that they could share information about their work together and continue to build community. They decided to meet twice a year. And so the next one will happen in 2022. And really, as I said, the focus is just kind of on that community building, resource sharing, best practice sharing. With small grants, Lisa asked me to prepare a slide with a little bit more information. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is because in the small grants, we had our first convening that was really about disability. So we had our disability learning convening on September 23rd. We had 3 presentations. We had Sarah Hersey, who was a former design team member, come and speak, and she led the breakout session that was on working with immigrant and refugee families that have children and youth who are also have experienced disability. We had Tamika Brannon-Phillips come, who's a community health worker and a community education worker who herself has multiple disabilities and is a parent to children with disabilities. And then we had a youth speaker as well, Nathan Brannon Stewart, who identifies as multiracial. He's also experiences high functioning autism and considers himself a leader, a youth leader. And he came and spoke about his experiences. Parents and youth from grantee organizations were able to attend part of the convening. Parents attended the breakout session that was on immigrant and refugee families, and youth attended kind of the main session. We did experience technical challenges, and so to kind of make up for that, we have put a lot of content on our website on disability at this time. So we have multiple videos of Sarah, Tamika, and Nathan presenting their information, worksheets on how to support youth to create support teams. A whole variety of information is now on the website, and it's accessible both to small grantees and to large grantees, so everyone can access those and learn from it. Finally, on that piece, I just want to share this slide from one of our grantee participants who said that during the interpretation challenges, I was able to facilitate a productive conversation with a small group of youth participants. Our 5th and 6th graders began considering and discussing disabilities in a meaningful way, and they had some noteworthy takeaways from the video that was shown in the first hour. So we feel like it was a success overall, but you know, it being still the pandemic, it was not without its bumps. So with that, I think I turn it over to John Kelly, or I turn it over to Commissioner Ryan. I'm not sure which.
Yeah, does anyone have any quick questions or comments? And do we have anyone from the public who has signed up to testify as well?
I think John Coughlin said there's no one signed up to testify, so we're no testimony, just if there's any questions.
Right. Did he mean that for the entire meeting then? I just.
Yes.
Okay.
No, we do not. No one signed up for this one.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Okay, anyone have any questions or comments before we move on to our financial report?
I think it was just great to get this update and hear how really our grantees were so excited to be in the space with each other and learn from each other and network from each other. And I think that this is just a really, I think, strong thing that we can offer because of the nature of what we do with the Portland Children's Levy. And I think we're, just like with our last presentation, really how the Children's Levy was so helpful to some of these organizations in managing COVID. I think this also shows how we can bring people together to really strengthen the work that they do in the organizations themselves. So I love this update. So thanks so much for doing it.
Okay, thank you. John Kelly, let's hear our financial update.
Erica, will you put up the one slide for me, please?
Yep.
Thank you. So this is just a very brief update about the current fiscal year, which begins July 1 and ends June 30. And so a little history, back almost 2 years ago now, January 2020, we got a number from the city economist who told us we would have about $21.9 million coming in this year. And then a year later, we got a new number that was $1.6 million lower. And we told you all about that, but we said at the time we can cover our commitments. That first number was a number we used to, you know, in addition to 2 other years of expected revenues, to set grant amounts. When we learned we were going to have less than expected, we looked at the whole picture and figured, okay, yes, we can still honor those commitments. Well, just last month, November 2021, we got a new number, and it's a little bit better than the old number. It's up from 20.3 to 21, maybe, probably. What has changed in the interim is in October, the imposed tax comes out. Everyone gets their property tax bill and sees how much they owe. And typically there's some delinquency. So we got a new imposed number, but we don't know how much the delinquency will be. And I talked with the city economist the other day, and he said it's probably going to be higher, but I can't tell you how much. So as long as it doesn't increase by 50%, we will have enough money to cover our commitments. It's very gray at this time, but tentatively positive news is what we're saying. It seems unlikely for the delinquency to go up that much, but we don't know. And we are going to have more information soon, which is also good news. Next month in January, we will get new estimates for the life of the levy. So we will know more, again, tentative news. We'll know more about what the city economist thinks right now. The piece of hard data that occurs in January is though in January property values are the basis for the October imposed tax. So we do have, it's not just a guess out of nowhere. It's a guess based on current property values. So tentatively good news. At least the imposed was higher than it was predicted and not lower. So we're taking that as good news. And we really, I will be surprised if the total is less than was estimated a year ago. So tentative good news. Any questions on that?
Thank you, John. Anyone have any questions? It actually sounds familiar to some of us, I'm sure. And you did a really good job of explaining that. So thank you so much, John. Finally, Erica will review the revised proposal to establish a community council in response to the committee and stakeholder feedback. Meg will then present stakeholder feedback on the revised proposal, and Erica will then facilitate our discussion about the proposal. So turn it over to Erica and Meg.
Okay. Just making sure. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. I'm really excited to present the revised community council proposal. So during the last allocation committee meeting, you instructed us, all of the allocation committee members, to go back and to develop the proposal further. Then we met with each of you individually to hear your suggestions, and we further revised the proposal. After that, we took the revised proposal and we vetted it with community stakeholders through an online survey, which Meg will talk about in a little bit. I just realized the revised proposal clarifies the key roles of the relevant bodies. So that's the community council, the allocation committee, and staff over the next 3 to 4 years leading into the funding rounds. It right sizes the workload of community council members to 12 to 15 hours of meetings annually. And it clarifies the roles on volunteer stipends, final funding recommendations, and the selection process for the community council members. So just to take a second to think, why should we even consider forming a community council? What's the problem that we're seeking to solve? Well, for one thing, the community council is a response to consistent theme and feedback that we've heard from multiple community engagement processes over the last 3 to 4 years. So in late 2018, early 2019, Portland State University's Center for Improvement of Child and Family Services recommended an advisory body. We heard the same recommendation again later in 2019 through the community engagement process that was led by Empress Rules. And then finally, once again in 2020 from the small grants design team. In addition, the City of Portland's Office of Equity and Human Rights Equity Plan Guidance for all bureaus promotes community engagement and funding decisions. In fact, it specifically asks bureaus to evaluate if communities of color are involved in investment and/or service decisions that impact them directly, whether representatives from communities of color are participants in the development of programs, policies, or services that impact them, and whether meetings are happening at least twice a year with communities of color, specifically to discuss racial equity and the impact of Bureau's works on communities of color. This proposal does all of these things by empowering Portlanders from communities whose children and youth have been most impacted by inequities to design the application and funding processes of the levy. The charge of the council would be to advise the levy staff and the allocation committee on the design and the implementation of future funding rounds in all program areas and grant types, so both small grants and large grants, and to participate in funding recommendations presented to the allocation committee. Okay, so looking at the structure, we're looking at 11 to 13 members of the council, meeting again, as I've said, 12 to 15 hours per year. We're asking for a commitment of a minimum of 3 years or a maximum of 6 years. And the reason why we chose that term was so that we wouldn't have attrition of the council before we've completed the design of the funding process. And then we revised the workload to be work that could be completed within that 12 to 15 hours with a minimum of outside work. So they would be doing the high level design work, not getting into some of the nitty gritty things that the staff would be working at. And we're going to be looking at those buckets of work a little bit more in just a second. In addition, we would be hiring a part-time community engagement coordinator to staff the council who would work in collaboration with all PCL staff to provide multiple supports to community members, which include food, childcare, and parking for interpretation for in-person meetings, as well as interpretation and translation and meaningful and reasonable accommodations for disability needs. So based on the recommendations that we heard from the community engagement process and from recommendations that we heard from all of you, we really worked to assure that the council members would adequately represent the diversity of our city. So we would be asking that all community council members live, work, and/or attend school in Portland, And we would be specifically looking for at least 3 members from East Portland and 2 members from North Portland. And then this next piece here is kind of the collective characteristics that we're looking for. So we're looking for people who have professional and or lived experience with Black, Indigenous communities of color, immigrant and refugee communities, have experience serving LGBTQ2SIA+ youth, who have experience, professional or lived experience with low income and food insecure families, people with disabilities and or parents of children with disabilities. We're looking collectively for people who have professional or lived experience in relevant fields such as education, after-school programming, social services, social justice, foster care. We would be looking for at least 3 people with experience working in small nonprofits, people who have experience working with houseless populations or who are themselves formerly houseless. We would like everyone to have experience working collaboratively with diverse groups of people. We would like at least 1 person to have experience with grant making, whether it's through the public sector or through foundations. And then we're asking that all community council members have no conflict of interest with current grantees, as well as kind of the additional bar of not having worked with current grantees for the last 2 years. And then finally, we're asking that the community council members that we would be recruiting would share this commitment to the City of Portland's core values of equity, anti-racism, collaboration, communication, transparency, and fiscal responsibility. Okay, and then this last slide before we get to Meg's piece is the timeline. So this really lays out the buckets of work for each group over the next 3 years. And in each phase of the work, the allocation committee would review, modify, and or approve the recommendations of the council. And in each phase, the staff would facilitate and coordinate the community council and bring their input to the allocation committee for each phase of the process. And the staff would be the ones implementing the decisions that the allocation committee makes. So next year in 2022, that whole year would be focused on the recruitment, the training, and the formation of the community council. And Meg will talk a little bit about that selection process in just a moment. But overall, in the first half of the year, the staff would be looking to select the community council members. We'd be going through that process. We'd be presenting options to the allocation committee. And once the council was formed and finalized and approved, then they would begin their trainings. There's 3 required trainings through the City of Portland. And in addition, we would want to give them training on the Children's Levy, kind of the Children's Levy 101. What have we heard from community engagement processes? How do our processes work? All of the basics that they would need to know in order to kind of know what questions they need to ask from the community in the next stage. They'd also be finalizing bylaws and ways decisions are made. So all of that happens in 2022. That being done in 2023, the community council will be working on advising and designing the community engagement process and recommending priorities. So that's like really thinking about, okay, what specific questions or problems do we want to pose to the community to get input on? And then also, like, what methods do we want to do? Do we want to look at a community conversation model like we did with small grants, or a consultant-led model like we did with Empress Rules? And those recommendations, the staff would bring to the allocation committee, we'd finalize it, and then the staff would implement that community engagement process. Once that's done in 2024, the staff would take all of the data, all of the things that we learned from the community engagement process, go back to council and they would start to advise and design the application and review process, which would then, that proposal would go to the allocation committee, and then staff would begin implementing the application and community review process in 2024. Finally, in 2025, we would review the scores from the community reviewers, all of the input. Staff would make funding recommendations that we would take to the community council. The community council would give input on those funding recommendations, and all of that information would go to the allocation committee so that you can make your final decision on who we fund in 2025. So that's a lot. But before we get to questions, I am going to turn it over to Meg so that she can talk a little bit more about the selection process for community council members, and then also what we heard from community stakeholders when we asked for their input on this proposal. And I'm also going to stop sharing my slide because Meg has her own slides.
Thanks, Erica. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. Can everyone see that proposed selection process? Awesome. Thanks for the nods. Helpful to see. All right. So thanks for bearing with us. Based on your input when we met with you individually over the last month and a half, and the community input that we heard in September from the survey that we did at this time, as Erica noted, we made some changes to the proposal. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we heard from you all individually and community members at that time was around the proposed selection process. So we delved a little bit more into Civic Life's advisory board program to understand more what they would be providing, which is mainly the support around the online application process. But we as staff and you all as the committee need to come up with the screening and selection process to determine the members. And so as a staff, we talked to some of our partners, our peers at Preschool for All, Multnomah County, and at Metro's Nature and Neighborhoods, because both of those public entities have advisory committee portions to their work, and we wanted to understand some of what they had been doing. And then we also looked internally to our experience with recent hiring involving community partners in our hiring processes, and the way in which we did our recruitment and selection of community reviewers, the over 60+ people who read and scored applications in the last round. So based on that, we as a staff are proposing that we would develop scoring criteria for applications to be on the community council based on the membership qualifications that Erica just reviewed with you, including the experience that's related to representation that we want on the council. Then we as a staff would recruit 3 external partners, plus have 2 staff members on an ad hoc work group that would be trained on the criteria and scoring. Each member would review the applications independently and score them. And then the ad hoc work group would come together and staff would facilitate them through looking at the results and creating options of membership recommendations, thinking of sort of 3 options of a slate of recommended council members. We would take those options, we as staff would take those options to each individual allocation committee member to discuss them and help refine them based on each individual member's input, and then work toward coming up with a final selection option. And the committee would meet in public to vote on the final selection. The proposed timeline for that process in the next 6 months is from January through March. We as staff would work with Office of Civic Life around that application process, including holding some meetings or workshops to help people who are interested in applying to be on the council navigate the Civic Life process. We also would begin working with the Bureau of Human Resources on the position and recruitment for the coordinator that would be hired to help support the community council. We would start asking for some community partners to join us in the ad hoc work group for the screening of the applications. And we would be hopefully having applications from folks interested in being on the community council due at the end of March or early April. And then from from April to June, we would have that work group meet and review its scores and create the options for recommended membership. We would be meeting individually with each of you as allocation committee members to look at those recommendations and refine the options to come up with the final selection. And then the new coordinator hopefully would join our staff in that period of time as well. So everything that you just heard from Erica and I in that proposal went out to the community at the beginning of December, and it was the same 300 stakeholders that we surveyed back in September. So when we met with you all in September, you had heard at that point results from a preliminary survey, 69 people who had responded to the proposal at that time for sort of general support and comment. And 87% of the people who responded at that time supported the proposal. We have refined the proposal based on input that they gave, input that you all gave. And the second proposal that we sent out had 30 respondents, so a much lower number. 28 out of the 30 of those folks support the revised proposal. They left positive comments, particularly calling out the clarity of timelines and the distinct roles outlined in the proposal for the community council, the allocation committee, and staff. They called out that the council is a commitment to community involvement and voice in PCL processes. And a couple of them also noticed the importance of hiring someone to support this work. So here are a few quotes from that. Appears clear and concise. Appreciate the timeline and roles of the community council, allocation committee, and PCL staff. Appreciate the clarity in roles so members know what to expect. Also appreciate the dedicated staff person for this rather than adding to an overworked staff. And appreciate the inclusion of timelines and representation, experience metrics to support transparency and accountability. So I will stop sharing. And with that, we just gave you a lot of information and we are open to questions and conversation.
I have one clarifying question. When you say East Portland, I assume that's east of 205, or what is the definition of East Portland?
Yes, Dan, typically we have defined it as two particular zip codes, so which are mostly lying entirely east of 82nd Avenue. I know those zip codes off the top of my head if you want them, but I can't imagine you do right now.
I bet Commissioner Vega Peterson might.
I live in
anyway, I'm just glad because some people still think it's east of the river. So I just wanted to clarify it was really East Portland.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. We're looking at entirely east of 82nd Avenue.
I just want to say like excellent work on putting this together. I'm really happy with where we've ended up with the role of this community advisory committee, what they're going to be doing, what's their commitments and expectations. I think that's really important, and the way that they're going to be engaged in the work that we do. I think it's a really good mesh with the work of staff and the work of this allocation committee, and it's just good. And I know it took a couple times to going back to the drawing board of like what this has looked like, but it's a very important, that work is very important because getting this right is good. So thank you for taking on this work. And I guess the only question I had is, in hiring the coordinator, is this something that was budgeted for this year and looking ahead? Okay, that's what I figured, but I wanted to double check on that. Okay, no more questions then, thank you.
Yeah, we made sure we had the money before we proposed that.
Any other comments, questions? I also wanted to say that I really felt listened to at our last meeting by all of the updates, and the role clarity was particularly important to notice. And looks like the respondents agreed as well. So good work, thanks.
I wanted to add that I agree it was very good work and appreciate you all listening. And I'm really heartened, particularly around right sizing the roles. I'm particularly sensitive to our soliciting information from underserved communities and folks with lived experience, and they're not often compensated for their time, quite frankly, and their expertise. And so I appreciate that we are paying them, but you also took a lot of care and making sure that even though we're paying them, we're paying attention to the work and making sure it was commensurate and reducing that amount of time. So it made a little more sense. So I really appreciate you guys taking that extra time and care.
Anything to add, Felicia or Mitch?
No, I think you guys have added all the comments, and it's really good that I see our comments and feedbacks incorporated in the final presentation. And I think it also takes into account when we originally worked with Empress Rules and the consulting firm way back when, that the staff here, PCL staff, took that into account and said, how can we adapt and make sure that voice is heard? And I think that this process is a reflection of that.
Yeah, I would second that. I think we're on a march towards accumulating more voices at the point where we're deciding where our funding is going to go. So it's been a real positive experience, and really appreciate the hard work that staff has put into it.
Great. Well, great work, staff. I think what you're looking for is a green light from the allocation committee. I think you just heard that from each voice on the committee. I don't know if you need a formal vote. Okay.
Yes,
so
please.
I'm now asking for, there you go. Felicia, that's you're going to make a motion.
A motion to approve the recommendation of creating this committee moving forward.
Perfect.
I'll second the motion.
Nice. All those in favor, say aye, raise your hand. Hello, everyone. Yep, there we go. Okay, it's unanimous. Ms. Pellegrino, you got what you needed, and great work by the staff. And I'm so delighted this moved forward. We're coming to the end of the meeting, and we're also the last day of someone that's been on the staff for a while. John Conklin has done a great job with communication, and I personally want to thank you. At this time, I want to just make sure we open it up to the room to just make you wildly uncomfortable, John, as we send you home on your last day with some love and support. So anyone want to chime in?
I'm happy to just kick it off. John, I think you were like the first person aside from Lisa that I met on the Portland Children's Levy when you came out to video my visit to one of our grantees. And it was such a great experience, one, getting to meet them, but just you were just wonderful. And you know, it can always be like awkward to be videotaped, but you always have made it so just personable and comfortable. And the work that you put together, the videos you create are just so touching and really capture, I think, the heart of our work at the Portland Children's Levy, and just really appreciate you and the way that you've been able to add that magic and heart to everything that you've done for the Levy. I think the communications and the way that we're able to tell our story to the public has just been incredible, and that's because of you. So thank you.
And I ditto what Commissioner Vega Peterson has said. You have left your legacy on the Levy, John, by your just amazing gift of storytelling and your care in making sure that the voices that you are doing the recording and the videoing of is at the center of it. And I think that is a true gift. And where you head off next, they are so blessed and fortunate to have you. And we will be forever grateful for just your time with us here at the Levy as well.
Thanks, John, for your kindness and warmth and grace. And I think Felicia said it great. You may physically be leaving, but your touch and your connection is going to live a long time.
John, thank you for your 4 years of service. And I just, I think it's great that you timed it with today's meeting. So thank you for that. It's wonderful to send you off. And all of us wish you so much good luck in your future endeavors. If you would like to have the final word on our salute to John, I would love to turn it over to you. Yay, you unmuted. You tell stories for others. Now you get to tell others.
Well, you know, that's so nice of you to say that. I wish I could speak the way that I tell stories with videos. That's kind of my thing. So I won't be as eloquent as you all, but Okay, it's been a lot of fun. It's been wonderful. It's so I really appreciate what you say, because I really try to put everything into telling the stories, and for them to be as authentic as possible. And so and I have had a lot of fun working with some of you on making videos and telling your own stories. I wish we could have worked with you, Dan and Mitch, but it's been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for the kind words, and best of luck in the future for everyone.
And I'll just chime in and say from the staff that we so appreciate the quality and rigor and modernization, and how much you've taught us all about communications methods that we didn't know. And I think that was a real gift, and something I really appreciate, and it will be missed. And we wish you a lot of luck on a move out of town, because I know that's always a stressful event. So we hope that goes smoothly.
Sean is also a really creative problem solver. I'll never forget going to him and saying, okay, I'm going to do a convening, and I need interpretation, and I need captioning, and I need to splice videos together in a stream. Is that a thing that can happen? It's like, we'll make it happen. So I really appreciate that.
Great. All right. Well, there's a lot of love coming your way, John. I hope you're receiving it well. And I also want to just thank everyone for joining us today. Our next meeting will be March 15th, 2022. Agendas will be sent to Levy email list and shared on Facebook and posted at portlandchildrenslevy.org. We welcome participation in all of our meetings. And if you'd like to join us for the next meeting to comment on the agenda, please do visit the website, and we'll make sure that you receive the link and you are a part of this meeting. Anyway, thank you everyone for a wonderful conclusion to the calendar year 2021. I wish all of you and your families a wonderful and warm end of the year holiday season. And until we see you in 2022, have a happy and joyous holiday season. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, thanks.